Hello everyone, this is Dr. Pavan Soni here. I'm the author of the book Design Your Thinking. And in this short video, I would like to talk about how do you become a good problem solver. Now, life is full of problems. We all understand that. Some of us have a tendency of avoiding problems and yet others try to embrace problems. But in any rate, what is critical is to learn how to solve problems in a much more systematic manner. So this short one today is about how do you solve problems well. Now imagine that you walk up to a doctor and the doctor asks you a question, what is your problem? And you typically start off by mentioning things like I have a headache, I have a stomach ache, I'm unable to sleep at night, I'm feeling drowsy and weak, etc. What you're essentially narrating to the doctor are symptoms and not problems. However, the doctor asked you, what is your problem? Now, why aren't you telling the problem? Do you try to hide something from the doctor? Are you trying to outsmart the doctor? And the answer is no. The reason you're not telling anything to the doctor is because you do not know what's your problem. You do not know it's bacterial or viral. Now, if you do not know the problem with your own body, with what confidence do you know a customer's problem or somebody else's problem? So you just do not know. You just know people's symptoms. However, we have a tendency that the moment you look at a symptom, you straight away try to give a solution to it. And I would like to call it as a quick fix. A friend walks up to you with a complaint and you give a suggestion without really understanding where it is coming from, your spouse, you do it to your clients, your colleagues, etc. And the excuse that we often give is that we are out of time. It's not that we are out of time, it's that we are out of cognitive resources. However, quick fix has a place under the sun, and we tend to use quick fix because not every problem necessitates that amount of attention. But that is a tool in your repository and not the tool. In the sense, it should not be the default mode of problem solving, it should be a choice. Okay. Now, the critical thing is that once you look at a symptom, you have to investigate further and go to the problem, the underlying problem. Okay. So, for example, somebody has a symptom of frequent urination, thirst, hunger after the food, maybe pain in the knees or blisters in the feet or losing eyesight. Now, these are all classic symptoms for diabetes. So, the problem is diabetes. But do you know why the person is diabetic? Once again, there could be multiple reasons to that, which means that even if I know the symptom, I can ascertain the problem, but still to go from the problem to the solution, I need to go through one more step, and which is what we call as root causes. Okay. Now, the critical phrase here is root causes and not root cause. Our classic literature has made us believe that there is always a root cause which we need to go to and attack, but not necessary. I mean, tell me a single thing in which you can for sure say there is a root cause. It's never a root cause. There are a bunch of things which are acting in concert and that manifests into something which is much more sinister, which means that you need to be comfortable with plurality, with multiplicity of root causes. So you go to root causes and maybe you can then identify the root cause or maybe the critical root causes which are solvable, which needs to be solved and which you can solve. And once you have identified that, and then you go straight away to solving the problem, and that technique is what we call as a perma fix. The criticality here is that you need to have a mechanism where you have quick fix and you have perma fix, and both these tools are available to you. Now, the another question would be that under what situation should you use quick fix, under what situation you should use perma fix. Now, think of a 2x2 matrix. On one axis you have the impact of a problem, and the second axis you have the frequency at which the problem is occurring. So, if a problem doesn't have a very high impact and it happens quite rarely, which is infrequent, then it's pretty safe to go for a quick fix. Okay, because you do not really have to spend so much effort because the problem is rare, the problem doesn't have a havoc to it, so you can quickly go through a quick fix or a band-aid kind of a solution, and you can move on to the much more important things in life. Because everything said and done, a perma fix definitely requires a higher cognitive resources, maybe more time, more resources in terms of money, and certainly there is a high opportunity cost because once you are at something, you can't do anything else parallelly. Okay. However, if the problem has a high impact and even though it has a low frequency, you must go for a perma fix because the impact is huge. Okay. These are the classic black swan events which you have to sort of prepare for. On the other hand, if you have a very high frequency and a low impact, you still have to go for a perma fix because you can't leave it on time or on chance, because over time these frequencies will accumulate to a very high impact, and no marks to guess. If you have a high impact and a high frequency, you must go for a perma fix. You see, It may seem to you that 3 out of 4 situations you have to go for a perma fix, only one situation you have to go for a quick fix. But what you need to understand is that in any condition you have to go for a quick fix. But in certain conditions you should not stop with a quick fix. In the sense, if there is a fire burning somewhere, you can't start looking at a committee and coming up with some sort of a permanent fix. You have to douse the fire at the first point. Okay, so you have to do a sort of perma fix. So a general rule of thumb that I would like to recommend is that in any situation, 75% of the problems can be solved with quick fix. It doesn't necessitate that amount of time and attention. However, 25% has to be dealt with a perma fix. And what I would strongly recommend is that you need to have a balance. Both these techniques should be available in your repository, and you should make a conscious choice of when to use a quick fix, and that quick fix should not be a default setting for you. So this is Dr. Pavan Soni. I hope this short video is useful to you. I would love to hear from you. What have you learned in terms of the problem solving skills? Thank you so much.